And I just have to say, as soon as I started hitting these drums, it felt like there was less snare buzz. I mean, it'll be interesting to see in the recording. The snare drum also sounded clear. I'm pretty surprised. Hello, my name is Jim, and today's video is about acoustic treatment. Last year around this time, I was in the middle of recording and also preparing to mix 7 songs on my band's album. So in order to get that work done, I made some acoustic treatment that I use both for tracking drums and also for mixing. In this video, I'm going to share some tips on acoustic treatment that I haven't seen in other videos out there on YouTube. And I'll also share some results, including before and after drum recordings. The first piece of advice that I would give you is to spend a decent amount of time planning out the treatment that you're going to need. You should ask yourself, what is the treatment going to be for, and what specific panels are you going to need? I planned around a single package of insulation, and I planned for a multi-purpose setup, as I mentioned earlier. So what my goals were is I wanted to treat all of the first reflections in my mixing position near my studio monitors where I'm sitting now. And then in addition to that, I wanted to cover fully behind my drum set and in the corner near the floor tom. So what I ended up doing is I made 2 24 by 46 panels that are 6 inches deep. One of them's a cloud that's above me, and the other one is a bass trap that I can put it in the corner there. It fits on that little shelf that I have, and also most of the time that is in the corner by my floor tom where my drums are set up. Then I also made 2 approximately 23 by 46 inch panels that are 3 inches deep. One of them's here handling the right side reflection when I'm mixing. The other one's back behind the drums right now. I made for the left side reflections in the mixing position, I made a 23 by 60 inch panel, 3 inches deep. That's over here. And then finally, I made a 24 by 30 by 3 inch deep panel that handles the rear reflections. Here you can see a diagram of how my space is set up. In order to find the first reflection points, we use the mirror trick. So I had my son hold a mirror against the walls and against the ceiling, etc., and move it around while I was sitting in the mix position, and we taped off all the areas where a speaker was visible in the mirror. After doing some additional acoustic measurements, which I'll share later in the video in the results section, I realized that I needed 2 additional panels. And you can see behind me there are these 2 panels that are behind the speaker. So I'll talk more about those later on because there's a couple learnings there. But you can see here on the video where I taped off using that mirror trick. So the second piece of advice that I'll give you is you need to decide if you really want to make the panels or if you should just buy them. You should ask yourself, are you handy? Are you comfortable working with tools, etc.? The goal, in my case, and I think this is where several of the YouTube videos that are out there fall short, they seem to have a goal of making panels that are as affordable as possible. But my goal, I wanted my panels to be affordable, but I also wanted them to be high quality acoustic panels that are going to last a long time. So you should really ask yourself, are you ready and are you prepared to make these panels? I consider myself to be, pretty good with tools and all that kind of stuff, and I'll tell you that after having gone through this, it is a lot of work to make good panels. And I'll show some tips about construction later about how I made those high quality panels. But I think you really need to think long and hard about whether you want to take on making these panels yourself. In the next section, I'll go through some highlights of the construction process and point out some tips along the way. This was recorded a year ago when my main focus was getting ready for the album that we were working on. So it's not intended to be an exhaustive step-by-step process of how to build the panels, but if you use this in conjunction with one or more of the many videos that are out there on YouTube that are purely focused on construction of acoustic panels, you'll have more than you need to make really high quality acoustic panels. Here you can see the smallest panel that I built. In order to make a strong frame for the 3-inch deep panels, I use 1x4 dimensional lumber in the US, and I reinforced the frame with a 1x2-inch frame. Here you can see me screwing together one of the 1x2-inch inner frames. The screws that I used were some screws that I just had on hand from a previous project, but you can see how I'm using a clamp to hold those together, and I'm going to pre-drill for all the screws, and I put one screw in each joint. This is sped up, obviously. I can't screw manually that quickly. So here you can see me insetting the reinforcement frame into the 1x4 outer frame. And for these 3-inch deep panels, you just inset it ever so slightly, like a 1/16 of an inch. In the larger frames that are the 6-inch deep panels, these are actually constructed out of 1x8 dimensional lumber with the same 1x2-inch inner frame. And here I needed to draw a line to figure out exactly where I needed to inset the inner frame to get the correct 6-inch depth for the insulation. And one advantage of this type of construction for both the 3-inch depth and the 6-inch depth panels, having that inner frame provides an air gap automatically in the back of the panel, which makes the panel more effective. And here you can see I'm about to do the pre-drill and screw in the inner frame onto the outer frame. And again, this is sped up. So the screws that I had on hand just happened to be the perfect length. This worked out well. So the next section here, you can see that I'm just sanding off any rough edges on the frames. You just want to break the edges because you're going to have cloth going over these. You don't want any sharp edges. And here I'm just dusting off the sawdust. So the mechanical engineer in me just was not happy with only screws for the cloud. So I've got these glue blocks in here where I'm just epoxying these blocks in the corners where it mounts to the ceiling. So in this segment, you can see I opted to get some furniture strapping for the larger panels just to provide a little bit of additional support for the insulation. I went with landscaping cloth for the back side of all the panels and also as an inner layer on the front side. So basically that landscaping cloth is really breathable and you can find other videos that suggest using the landscaping cloth inside the panel and then have your final cloth wrapping it. You can see that I'm stapling starting from the middle of the panel, working my way to the corners, and I did not skimp at all on staples. So this detail shows that I use Loctite to ensure that the eye bolts for the cloud would never come loose. For the 60-inch panel, because it's a larger panel, I have another central member in the frame just to make that strong. This rear view of a panel here shows the eye hooks that are used to mount the frame like a picture frame. You just put some wire in there. Here's one of the panels with the insulation put in. This insulation is designed to be snugly squished in between two 2x4s, so I made sure to size the insulation so that it is snug in the frame. And also you can see that I've got an extra member here on the 60-inch panel to staple to. For the cloth, I went with Acoustic cloth from ATS Acoustics. I considered using burlap, but was against it because it's flammable, and some of the other cloth options that I found in the fabric store, they might be strong, but they weren't very breathable, etc. So I went with a proper acoustic cloth that has the right strength, the right breathability, and is not flammable. One key learning was for the cloud, I went with a lighter colored cloth. And if you look here closely, you can see the landscaping cloth line through that cloth. So if I were to do this over again, I probably would have been more careful about the fold over line on the landscaping cloth. So this next section shows me stapling on the outer cloth on the smallest panel, one of the 3-inch panels. And, this is just a tedious process to get the cloth stapled taut onto the panel. So here I am doing the final stapling of the material onto the big bass trap. I already did the cloud last night, so I've already gone around the entire edge, and now I'm just cleaning up all the raw edges, folding them under and stapling them. There she is. And for final details, I tacked down the places where the material folds over on all the panels. And for the panels that touch the floor, I put on some rubber feet. Okay, so I hope it was helpful to go through that construction sequence, and I hope that you got some tips out of that if you have decided to construct your own acoustic panels. Now is the point in the video where we get to hear what the acoustic panels sound like for drum recordings. So what I did is I played through a little playing sequence. There's a little surprise in there. We'll see how AI deals with it. But I went through the playing sequence both without the panels and with the panels in place. And I also exhaustively went through each instrument on the drum set, both without the panels and with the panels, so that I could hear isolated what the panels were doing. When I listen back to this myself, I listen to the overheads alone, I listen to the room mic alone, and then I listen to all of the close mics alone. And by far the biggest impact was in the overhead mics, and the room mic. So what we're going to do to keep the video length under control is I'm going to be playing back only the overheads. And what I'm going to do first is just do that playing sequence. And you'll notice I've kind of interleaved the no panels with the panels for each part of the playing sequence. So you'll hear, like, I'll play this special fill, and I'll play it without the panels, and then with the panels. You really should have high quality headphones on for this portion of the video so that you can really hear what the impact is. So right now we're just going to go through that playing sequence, and you should be listening with headphones. You look in the back and see where the panels are present and where they're not. I'm not going to give any hints to what I'm hearing, but I'll see you on the other side, and we can talk about the detailed results after we listen to this sequence. Okay, so now that you've listened to the playing sequence, this is the point where I'm going to tell you what I heard, and I'll also play back some of that individual instruments. I'll go around the drums and play a few highlights that align with what I was hearing in the individual results. So, and by the way, if you hear something different than what I'm about to tell you right now, feel free to comment below. That's the first time I ever asked anybody to do that in one of my videos. So, what did I hear listening back to the results? The first thing that I heard is the 10-inch rack tom definitely was much more clear, and there was less snare buzz. I was kind of surprised at how good that 10-inch rack tom sounded. And you'll notice behind me, the middle panel that's behind the 13-inch rack tom right now, I've lifted that up off the floor just ever so slightly, and I did that to get a little bit more effect on the 13-inch rack tom after going through this testing. Let me know in the comments what you think about the 10 versus the 13-inch rack tom, if the improvement is the same or not. But that's what I heard. So number two big improvement that I heard in the results was the kick drum. So without the acoustic treatment, I'm hearing much more of the smack beater impact sound of the kick drum and much less of the low-end bass portion. When the paneling is put in place, I'm definitely hearing more of the low end. Now, often people will just EQ, do a high pass filter and EQ that out, but I'm definitely going to be experimenting with that sort of newfound low end clarity of the kick drum that I'm hearing in the overheads. And then number 3 is the bell of the ride cymbal. This was somewhat stunning to me. I had to listen back to the sequence as well as the individual tracks to make sure there wasn't some weird, like I was hitting the bell differently or something. But the bell just sounds better to me. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play each of those individual things. I'll go through the drums, and then I'll do the kick drum and the ride cymbal bell to see if, to have you hear the individual results that I'm hearing in your headphones. And if you disagree, if you're hearing something different, please comment below. Thank you very much. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed hearing the comparison between no acoustic treatment and having the acoustic treatment and the results that I got in the overheads for my recorded drum sound. I hope that's helpful to you. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about mixing results. So you may remember from the beginning of the video that I had 2 goals. Number 1 was improve the recorded drum sound with the acoustic treatment. And number 2 was I had a job to do. I had to mix several songs, 7 of them, on my band's album, and I wanted to have a good area to listen on studio monitors. When I do mixing, my primary mixing modality is listening in Sennheiser HD600 headphones, but I needed monitors to get, I needed that secondary area to listen on speakers. So I got KRK monitors. They're entry-level monitors, and I went through a whole process of deciding where the best location of those would be. I'm not going to go through any of that right now, but what I'll tell you is that when I added the acoustic treatment, I definitely heard more clarity in the monitors compared to without the acoustic treatment. My band has a song called Jazztown, and there's a breakdown in that song, and I play a cymbal part, and I definitely heard more clarity in that cymbal part and in the highs generally. And I did spend quite a bit of time in preparing to mix, just listening to music in the new area with the studio monitors with the acoustic treatment, and I'm really happy with how it sounds. The second testing that I did is I did use the app that you can get for free from KRK to do a frequency response test. I did that before and after. I'm not going to go into, the specifics of my room because they're going to be different from what your room would be. But what I'll tell you is, even with the acoustic treatment, when I did that KRK frequency response measurement, I'll show you all the results in a couple minutes here. I noticed that there was this 600 hertz dip even after I had added the acoustic treatment. And I've gone back now, and there are other people who have tested the KRK Rocket G5 monitors, and that 600 hertz dip is kind of a characteristic of those monitors. But what I was deep into the rabbit hole of acoustic treatment at the time that I did the initial testing. And I was listening to a Jesco video, and he mentioned that there's a cutoff frequency. I don't remember exactly what frequency it is, but above a certain frequency, if you're seeing an anomaly, what Jesco was saying is this has to be a reflection. And that was very, very helpful to me because I realized that I had not treated behind my monitors. And I listened, there's not, the front of the monitor has a lot of power coming out of it. The back there is not a lot of power coming out of there. But what I did was I heard that advice from Jesco that it has to be a reflection. And I've got this acoustic panel behind me, behind this lovely 18-inch K Dark Crash. That panel is not used in my mixing setup. So what I did is I tested using that panel behind the right monitor. And when I did this testing, I tested the monitors individually. That's really where I saw that 600 hertz dip. I found that when I put that panel behind the monitor, I did the mirror trick, it definitely made a difference and it improved things. So here is where I lucked out in a huge way. So I had made an earlier decision to buy my fabric from ATS Acoustics. So once I realized that I needed additional panels, I was able to just order two 24 by 24 inch panels from ATS Acoustics to complete my setup. One thing I mentioned earlier, it may have kind of flown by, I designed around using only a single package of insulation. There are some other videos where they've talked about should you really be using rock wool versus maybe a material that might be considered a little bit more environmentally friendly. My goal was to have almost zero waste, right? To use the entire package, and that's what I did. So at the point where I realized I needed two more panels, I could not construct two additional panels. I did not have enough insulation. I had very little waste left. I'll also mention, as an aside, that it really wasn't a big deal handling that insulation. I did all the insulation installation in my garage. I cut with a serrated knife. I wore gloves and I wore a mask, and there really was very minimal handling, and it wasn't a big deal. So if you're concerned about using rock wool, as long as you have kind of an outside-ish, garage-ish area where you can handle it, I don't think the handling was much of a big deal at all. There's not a lot of handling. So, in short, I did some testing. I found a 600 hertz dip. I tested again. I found that I could fix that dip with additional panels, and I bought the additional panels from ATS Acoustics. What I'm going to do now is just show you the frequency response curves. What I did afterwards, after all this, is I tested again to make sure, basically that I wasn't nuts and that this 600 hertz dip really is there. I tested not only using the KRK app, I also did a test using one of my own microphones, sort of as a control to make sure that I was really seeing the results I thought I was seeing before sharing it on a video with you. So I will show you all those results, the before and after of the panels that are behind the monitors, using both the KRK app and also my own microphone. So here is a video of me conducting the before test using the KRK app. I've got pink noise playing on the right speaker, and I'm moving my phone around in a similar way to what I saw on a video by KRK that showed how you should conduct this type of a test. And here is a video of me conducting the after test on the right speaker, again using the KRK app with pink noise. And for completeness, here's the testing I did with my own condenser microphone. I'll show a little section of both the before and the after. The key thing here, both with the KRK app and my condenser microphone, I'm not trying to do an absolute measurement. I'm not really trying to get that curve to be 100% accurate in an absolute sense. What's important, and you'll see this when I show the results, is the difference using the same microphones. So basically, we're not trying to get an absolute measurement. We're trying to see how did the result change before and after. So in the upper left-hand corner here, you can see that 600 hertz dip before there was treatment behind the speakers. And then on the bottom left, you can see afterwards that there has been some improvement according to the KRK app once the treatment was added. Looking to using my own microphone, a condenser mic, you can see before, you can see that same 600 hertz dip. And then after, you can see that there has been some improvement. Hello again. If you've made it this far in the video, I want to thank you very, very much for watching. I had a huge amount of fun making this video, building the acoustic panels, recording drums at home, mixing at home. I just love this stuff. So it's a joy for me, and I hope that all of this is helpful for you. To summarize what we went through today, if you're going to go down the path of making some acoustic treatment or just getting some acoustic treatment, my recommendations are plan out what you need and make sure that you have your goals straight and that you get the right acoustic panels that you need. You need to decide if you're going to make versus buy. I really recommend doing a good job constructing the panels. The frame design that I came up with, I think, is a lot more robust than some of the other ones that I've seen in videos out there. And it's got the air gap behind. If you want your panels to last, they're going to be moved around and that sort of thing. I really recommend following some of the tips that I gave in the construction. Also with the materials, choose good materials. If you happen to need some extra panels and you've bought acoustic cloth from a company, you're able to get some more panels that match. So hopefully those things are all helpful, and most of all, I hope that you really enjoy, if you go down this path of building your own or buying acoustic treatment, I hope that you have tons of joy listening to music, mixing music, and recording music using your new acoustic panels. So thank you very much again for watching, and you have an excellent rest of your day or evening wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much.